gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? The show starts in 3, 2, 1, go.
Good morning, CaneSport. It's April the 14th, 2023. I'm Gary Ferman, the publisher of CaneSport.com, joined once again by our managing editor, Matt Shodell, as we discuss the news of the day. And Matt, the news of the day cannot begin today without the local weather forecast, because it has rained for 2 days straight. And I woke up this morning with a single question. Should the Miami Hurricanes play the spring game tonight? I mean, there's been probably about 25, 30 inches of rain in Fort Lauderdale in the last 48 hours. The field has got to be mushy. I can't imagine it being any other way. The rain percentage all day today is like 65%. There's afternoon thunderstorms forecast in the Broward County area. And I grimace at the idea of them playing the spring game tonight on a field that is not going to be in its best condition under any circumstance, I can't imagine. And are they unnecessarily risking injuries if they do so? Guys can turn ankles, guys can blow out knees. I mean, I don't want to be an alarmist, but like I woke up this morning seriously questioning, should they play that spring game tonight? Your thoughts?
I mean, there are schools now that don't play spring games because, let's face it, it's sort of just a waste of a practice. I mean, I was talking to somebody at the Kentucky site, and they don't have a spring game, and the person sent me their bunch of players saying that they're happy they don't have a spring game. What do you need a spring game for, It's not like the spring game is for the fans, right? You have 15 practices, and you're essentially, I hate to say wasting one, but in real football terminology, coaches look at it as a waste because they're not teaching, they're not running the actual offense and actual defense they're going to run against other teams. It's just to run around and play some football and hope nobody gets hurt. That's really what they're doing. So, yeah, the field's going to be messy. It's not a great situation. But I don't think at this point you can say we're canceling the spring game and just having another practice because, A, they've hyped it a lot. Fans are excited for it. And B, they haven't given the media enough access to watch the team. So they don't have a choice. The media has to watch them play to talk about how bad they are. Otherwise, what's the point of covering practice?
Well, we don't know what's going to happen, of course, but I did want to throw it out there because I do think it's something that Mario Cristobal has to think about as this morning and into the afternoon goes forward. But as of right now, we are covering the spring game as if the spring game is going to be played. And
yeah, I mean, can you imagine if somebody gets hurt because the field's just a mess? It's been swamped. I mean, it's been swamped. There's going to be no real footholds on there. It doesn't drain that fast.
That's what I said 5 minutes ago.
No, I understand, but can you imagine if they play it?
Matt, earth to Matt.
I mean, I'm just thinking about it. You know what? I process things very slowly. People who have ADD are going to be very angry at you, Gary. You are an anti-ADD persona, whatever. Not cool. Not cool.
I just said earth to Matt. I didn't say anything about ADD.
No, but if people process things slowly,
out there politically on a subject like such as
that, somebody processes things slowly.
ADD. I probably have ADD myself. I can't focus on anything from 1 minute to the next.
You think
but
ADD?
I can focus on the fact that it has been raining, unlike it has rained in Fort Lauderdale for. I mean, some people are saying 1,000 years. I don't know how they come up with that stat. I don't know who's been keeping track of weather for 1,000 years. But I know this: the airport's underwater. The roads in downtown Fort Lauderdale are underwater. Poor Stephen Wagner can't get out of his apartment because everything's underwater. They were pushing floating cars up the street in downtown Fort Lauderdale yesterday. So, I mean, I don't see how this field can be in any kind of condition that I would want to go out there and play football if I didn't have to. But I know some people are looking forward to it, and they're probably saying, Gary, shut up. But like,
Right.
I'm sitting there thinking, like, keep this team healthy. Like, they just went through a spring practice with not a lot of injuries that were suffered during the course of spring practice, at least none that we are aware of that we've been able to report. And I think, that knock on wood, they've had a pretty good spring in that regard. So to me, it makes no sense to go out there and risk, ankles and knees and stuff on a wet field where your cleats are going to get stuck in the mud and things like that. That said, until they tell us there's not a spring game, we're covering it, like I said before Matt interrupted me, like there is a spring game. So we have all kinds of stuff on the website today. We've got story on defensive players with the most to prove in tonight's spring game. We've got a story on offensive players with the most to prove in tonight's spring game. We have multiple stories on the stacked visitor list of prospects that will be attending the spring game tonight. Key recruiting storylines to watch during Miami's spring game. Matt, we're covering this thing like it's a big deal, rain or shine. Your thoughts on what Miami has accomplished so far this spring and how big of a deal this spring game that is scheduled for tonight is for this football program?
I already said, you don't pay attention, do you? Now you're yelling at me. You didn't listen to me.
I'm not talking about the weather. I'm talking about the football product now.
I literally said it's a waste of time. This is for the fans. They're not running their offense. They're not running their defense. Do you get to see that Ray Joseph?
It's in skeletal form. I mean, they are running their offensive defense.
Yeah, very, very scaled down. Do you get to see Ray Joseph, see that he's fast? Yeah, but we already knew that. Do you get to see that Tyler Van Dyke can throw the ball down the field accurately? Yeah, but we already knew that. I mean, there's not much fans are going to learn. If the offense makes a big play, well, it's because someone on defense made a bust or didn't do what they were supposed to. If someone on defense intercepts the ball, it's because the receiver ran the wrong route or the quarterback threw the ball wrong. Every play, there's going to be a consequence, whether it's positive or negative. So it really is honestly just for the fans, and the fans will have a nice party, and the players will just, sort of run around. Hopefully they'll have a good time, but you can't glean. I mean, we're going to look as talking heads. We're going to glean everything we can. We're going to run content for a week about what we learned from the spring game. Everyone's going to do that. There's nothing else to write about. How amazing whoever had the most catches and yards was. Wow. He could be the next Kendall Tompkins, So we'll be writing stuff like that. But aside from that, I never read much into the spring game. If the offense looks amazing, what does that mean for the defense? If defense looks amazing, what does that mean for the offense? Defense is usually ahead. So what went wrong if they didn't do well? Defensive line was missing everyone. How come they got 8 sacks against the first-team offensive line? The one thing I will say is, I'm very happy about this, that they're doing ones versus ones. I don't understand why any program, and tons of them do ones versus twos. I don't understand it. I get when some of them do orange versus green just for fun, and they make teams like what Gary and I drafted the other day. But, I don't get ones versus twos. I mean, what, do you think the twos are going to win? It makes no sense to me. Good versus good. Twos versus twos, and then later on you mix it up a little bit. You give some twos a chance to go against some ones if they've earned that through the 14 practices. I mean, the other way of doing it, which Miami's always done, made no sense to me. So I'm really, really happy that Mario's doing that. And you can finally see, some much better matchups, Jacoby George against whoever, Devontae Brown, stuff like that, instead of, just some second-team cornerback or the second. Can you imagine the second-team defensive line going against the first-team offensive line? I mean, Miami would run for 300 yards and 5 touchdowns, and fans would think we had the greatest running backs and offensive line in the history of the game if they didn't know better, I mean, the second-team defensive line is going to be pretty bad. There's just no personnel. I think there's even a walk-on the second-team defensive line right now. So, and I think the second-team offensive line is almost down to walk-on level too. I mean, they barely have depth also.
I thought that, let's see, for the sake of the fans that are going out to drive Pink Stadium tonight, and even in the event that there is not a spring game and if the decision is made that the field is not suitable to take the team out on, let's take a few minutes and just talk about what we've gleaned from spring practice so far, just to give people a little bit of a primer. I'll kick it off. I'll go position by position. We actually talked about a lot of this and went through a lot of this when we did our fantasy draft, putting the teams together, so it's fresh on our minds. Let's start with the quarterback position. I think if I was going to sum it up, Matt, Tyler Van Dyke has been back to being Tyler Van Dyke from everything that we've seen and heard. Ja'Cory Brown has taken a step forward from where he was a year ago, but not to the point where we would sit here and say definitively right now he's the next quarterback at Miami, because Emory Williams has performed beyond where you would expect a freshman to perform. Curry himself said that Emory Williams is far ahead of where he was as a true freshman, and that is accurate. Emory Williams prepared himself for this. He did a great job picking up the offense. He was able to function from a mental standpoint like a veteran, and he's got a good arm, and he's got a really good touch on his balls. And this is not a kid that's starting at square one as a college quarterback. He's got some skills now, and so we're not going to declare either one of them the next man up at QBU. I personally think there's at least an even chance that they will go into the portal at the end of the season and look for that next starting quarterback. Or
You think at the end of the season? You think not in this window? Huh?
The next portal cycle is what I'm guessing.
Oh, that's like in 2 days.
No, not this one. I'm thinking the next one.
Oh, okay. I think they want another one now.
Well, they might. It might make sense to do that. We will see what's available. I mean, if a guy comes available, they're going to pounce. But I don't think that it's a given, Matt, that one of these two guys that are backups right now are guaranteed to be the starting quarterback for Miami next year.
There's no guarantees of anything, obviously.
Yeah. So
it's free agency. I mean, it's like, in college basketball, big coaches, a Michigan State coach was complaining the other day. Even coaches who can use the portal to their benefit, hate the portal because they're forced to pander to student athletes that they never had to pander to before. You have to make them happy, not just as players, but financially sound. That's not usually a head coach's job to deal with that. And technically it's not, technically they're not allowed to deal with it. But I mean, the truth is, in real life, a head coach has to make sure that his players are staying with the program. What are you supposed to do? Just ignore free agency and pretend it doesn't exist? The best coaches are the ones who recognize what free agency is and attack it head on. So this free agency in football is going to mirror, hopefully, what Miami did in basketball. Because let's face it, if there wasn't free agency in basketball, Nigel Pack went to the highest bidder, happened in Miami. Isaiah Wong probably would have left to play overseas or try the NBA, whatever. He came back because he got six figures. And Nortet Omir may have come anyway, but certainly the money was a reason that he locked in with Miami. You don't have those three players, you're looking at probably 500 or less, no matter how good Jim Larinaga is. So now the football team has a similar situation. In basketball, it's a lot easier to become really good really fast because all you need to do is sign two or three really, really good guys, and you've got a pretty good team. In football, you have to identify the holes, and Tyler Van Dyke talked about this yesterday. You have to identify the holes you have at each position, and then attack it in the portal. So this is the real test for Mario, because my feeling is he has another year and a half of goodwill left. He has to have a better season this year and then a really good season next year. 6 or 7 wins each of the next 2 years. Fan base riots. Recruits are slow to come here.
Yeah. And they're going to write a check for 40, 50 million to buy him out. Okay.
No, he's not going anywhere. I'm talking about for the program to be – I didn't say he's going anywhere. I'm saying for the program to have success. Because if you have 6 or 7 wins this year, even 7 wins or 8 wins the following year, the perception is going to be Miami is still, struggling, and recruits aren't going to want to come here. Oh, you can't get developed at Miami. Oh, look at the fans at Miami. They're all really upset with the program, which they will be if that happens. That's what I mean, Gary. He's not going anywhere. They can't afford to get rid of him. He has to succeed. There's no choice but for him to succeed. But with that said, he has to win the portal. Manny Diaz only won the portal. He never won in recruiting, and it got him to 8 or 9 wins. Mario last year was at 5 wins. You have to win in the portal. So far, Miami has not won in the portal. Miami's portal additions last year were not good enough. There was only, I think, 3 or 4 difference makers out of the 10 guys they got. This year, I'm not thrilled with a lot. I like Devontae Brown, but and I like Matt Lee, and I like Javion Cohen. But they've already taken, 9 guys in the portal, and those are the only 3 that stood out to me. And you can't just waste scholarship spots on guys. If you're going to take a guy, even if he only has a year to play, he has to be a hit. He can't just be a third teamer. I hate to use Jacob Lichtenstein as an example, but it's a guy who takes up a roster spot for 2 years now. And, I don't know that he's going to be very productive. It doesn't appear so. So these are the kinds of things that are troubling that Mario, I know he wants to do better. And he has to be able to do better, but you need to have that free agency money. You need to have that free agency success in addition to his great recruiting. It's unfortunate because, like I said, when he came in, it's such a shame. He's the best recruiter in the country, and now NIL is going to screw it all up. And you know what? So far, I've been right because he recruited a great class, and he developed players fine, but there's been no results. And his NIL, the NIL money, whatever they gotten for free agency, the 19 transfers they brought in over the last 2 years, there have been maybe 6 of them right now that I'd say are going to be good, and that's not good enough.
All right. So here's what I'm going to say. We've been down this path before. This is not new for the University of Miami to have a football coach come in who has to do a total rebuild like Mario Cristobal has to do. Yes, this is a total rebuild. You can try to sugarcoat it. You can't. The roster was an absolute disaster. Matt and I, even now, after a year of recruiting, Matt and I went through this fantasy draft to get ready for the spring game, and we were just astonished at when you really break it down and you start looking at each of these individual positions, you really start to realize that there is no depth on this football team. There's not a lot of elite talent on this football team, and this is a major project that Mario Cristobal has taken under. So, live to jump up his butt at your own peril, seriously. And I know some people are going to say, oh, there's Gary defending Mario. Baloney. Okay, that is baloney. That is a cop-out. This program was not in a very good place a year ago. It's in a better place today than it was a year ago. It still has a long way to go. Now, I said Miami has been down this path before. Howard Schnellenberger came in a very similar situation. It was a beaten up program, had a few good players, but it was a major rebuild. He goes 5-6 the first year, just like Mario Cristobal. Now, year 2, he went 9-3. Year 3, he won 9 games. Year 4, he won 7 games. But year 5, they went 11-1 and won the national title. So, I think you have to manage expectations and understand that this is probably going to be incremental. I mean, Butch Davis, he goes 8-3, 9-3. Then they go 5-6 because of the probation. Then he goes 9-3, 9-4 before they go 11-1. So, reality probably is that this is going to be a 7, maybe 8-win season coming up here in the fall. Anything better than that would just be absolutely miraculous, I think. That is probably reality, and I would prepare yourselves for that without thinking it's negative if it plays out that way. But getting back to what we were doing, talking about the team, I'm going to skip running backs. There's nothing to talk about there. I'm going to skip tight ends since Arroyo was hurt all spring, and it was mostly about the young kids and Jaleel Skinner just breaking in. Not a ton to say there. Jaleel Skinner did do a better job this spring catching the football than he did last year, and that was forward progress for the tight ends. The young kids are they're learning. Running backs, it was all Henry Parrish, Don Chaney, very limited work because there were only 2 running backs, really, essentially. So I'm going to jump full ahead to the wide receivers, Matt, which I thought took a decent step forward this spring. I thought they were catching the ball better. I thought their route running was better. I thought they had a much greater connection with their new coach, Kevin Beard, to the point where multiple guys were saying that Kevin Beard is the best coach they've ever had in their lives as receivers. All these things to me, Matt, are very positive. I think, Robbie Washington, Ray Joseph are 2 young kids that are going to inject some playmaking ability, put pressure on Brashard Smith. And I think he was responding a little bit and playing better this spring. So they got a lot of receivers now who can at least function. I don't think they have a number 1, and it's a big question. Can you win enough games without a number 1? But all in all, I have to call the spring a success to the receivers, Matt.
Well, the receivers are coming from Josh Gaddis territory, and they've taken some veiled shots at him. How Kevin Beard's the greatest receivers coach ever. And even Tyler Van Dyke yesterday saying how he can finally audible and play freely, and how the new coordinator It's not too complicated. He just lets him play without thinking. Well, we can audible and adjust routes on the fly and have fun. Apparently, conversely, that was not the case last year. Now, with that said, let's call a spade, okay? It's April 14th, spring games today, right? It's April 14th, and what was it, five months ago the season ended? Somewhere in there. So in 5 months, they haven't added a transfer portal number one wide receiver. They've added 2 true freshman wide receivers who are tiny but fast. And we've seen maybe 30 minutes of practices, very limited, where they're actually doing stuff against a defensive back. Gary's ready to proclaim this a receiver core that's fixed. I am not, because I like to see it to believe it. I
didn't say fixed.
Okay,
I think they still need a number one, but I think the guys that are there are better.
In the time that I've watched, I've seen Ray Joseph dropping passes, regardless of him working on the jugs, apparently, hours on an end before practices. I've seen Brashard Smith still struggling to hold on to the ball. I've seen Jaleel Skinner still struggle to hold on to the ball. I've seen Jacoby George catch the ball a heck of a lot better. So, look, and Isaiah Horton seems like he looks better. They tell us Colby Young looks great, but I haven't seen him do much because we don't get to see much. So we're relying on Miami telling us things. And again, it comes back to, I like to hear both sides. I when somebody tells you how great everything is, if you got to dinner with a couple and they're touchy-feely the whole time and talking about how wonderful their life is, I guarantee you they're going to get divorced within a year, okay? All Miami's doing is being that touchy-feely couple right now. They're saying how great everything is. Nothing's bad. Everything's perfect. Oh, every position is better. Everybody's improving. They're buying in. I've heard this before. I've seen this movie for the last 20 years. I just want to see it on game day. So I'm not here to proclaim the receiver room's fixed. I'm not a talking head who's just going to make stuff up because you're Gary Ferman and everything's always going to be rosy. I'll believe it when they do it in a game. Ask me again in 5 months, 6 months.
I'm not sending all of our subscribers and fans into the next 4 months in misery. I'm sorry. I'm not going to sit here and say this team isn't going to be better than 5-7. I think it will be better than 5-7.
You're asking about the receivers. I'm talking about the receivers.
I know, but I'm just talking about in general. Like, no, I'm not.
By the way,
I'm not going to be a negative Nancy. I'm just not.
I
understand the process.
I predicted in the 7 to 9 win range, most likely 8 wins this year. You're actually below me, okay, in your prediction. So don't call me negative Nancy. You're the 6 to 7 win guy.
I said 7-8.
So why am I so negative all of a sudden? You're saying what I said.
Because you're negative constantly.
No, I'm a realist. You think it's negative because you're up here with everything's amazing. For the last 20 years, everything's been amazing according to Gary Ferman, and I'm so negative. It's called living in the real world.
You're never heard me say anything's been great in the last 20
years. You're Keanu Reeves living in the Matrix.
You're pandering to your minion, to your followers.
No, I'm not. Have you seen the Matrix? Because you're the guy still living in the fantasy world. You haven't been hatched out of that fluid-filled sack, fallen into the ground in some hideous reality. You have to go on a spaceship to try and save the Miami Hurricanes. I am in the spaceship trying to save the Miami Hurricanes. You're still living in the land with those guys who wear those sunglasses. You don't even know what movie I'm talking about. So
I have no idea what you're talking about. But hey, so listen, let's jump to the offensive line. I think we agree pretty much on the receivers. The offensive line can be summed up like this. The first team offensive line is massively better than the first team offensive line of a year ago. You got the transfers, Matt Lee, Javion Cohen, Jalen Rivers is playing well at left tackle to the point where I don't know that Zion Nelson can get his job back even if he is healthy. Inez Cooper at right guard and Francis Mayagoa at right tackle is significantly better than DJ Scaife. This is a better offensive line. That said, I'm not sure that it's more than 6 or 7 deep, and that's if Zion Nelson's healthy. Because once you get past Samson Okinola, who's a true freshman, backing up at left tackle, there's not much there, folks. And I hope I'm not hurting anybody here. But there's not a ton that is tangible that you could see. Now, the one thing I'm going to say is, Matt McCoy was a guy they felt good about, and I believe he might have, for some reason, he was not full practicing. I don't think this spring. Maybe he's a little nicked up or whatever. We don't know for sure. But there is not a lot of depth that you would feel good about. I think they will be looking in the portal here immediately for a reinforcement or two on the offensive line. Not the easiest thing to do to bring in guys that are probably going to be backups, but I think they're going to be looking. We'll see what happens there. Matt, unless you have something to add to that, I will jump over to the defensive line.
I'll just briefly add that I thought, I tried to compare you to Neo in the movie. You were definitely not Neo. I still am the Oracle.
No,
and the Oracle, you don't even know the movie. And the Oracle says that a year ago, you were saying the same thing. And I was echoing it. I was echoing it to some point too. I thought the line would be better. So I'm not going to go out there and say it's going to be this amazing offensive line. I don't see how it can be worse. They added a really good Alabama transfer, a really good UCF transfer. If Jalen Rivers stays healthy, great. But what happened last year to the offensive line, I'm still not sure it was as bad as it looked because the injuries really killed that line. If they have another injury to a couple of guys, they're going to be in trouble, man. And the offensive line are guys that get hurt. So that's concerning. They don't have depth. But, this fantasy world that Gary continues to live in, they're going to go to the portal to get a backup offensive lineman. Who wants to come here to be a backup? They've got a starting five.
Logan Sagapolo, John Dennis.
What are you talking about? I thought you said a transfer.
Backups that came in the portal last year.
They came in hoping they were going to start.
Okay.
Which position? You're going to tell people they're going to start over Jalen Rivers, Javion Cole, Matt Lee?
You're going to let them compete.
Nobody's coming here when they think they're going to be a backup.
I don't even know what's going to be in the portal. I can't predict. I'm just saying I think they need to look for some reinforcements on the O-line.
Of course.
I don't believe what they have today is good enough.
But what you're not understanding, you continue to not understand how the portal works. People in the portal are either going for money grabs or to be starters somewhere where they're already a backup somewhere else, for the most part, or they're returning home or whatever. Okay. The money grab's going to come in for a starter, not a backup. Miami right now, according to both of us, is looking for depth in the portal at the offensive line, not a starter, depth.
Except for one thing, Matt. There are way more kids in the portal than are going to find homes.
Right. So you're going to get an average backup, no better than a Logan Sagapolo or whoever. Not that Logan's bad, but you're going to get a backup. You're going to get more depth from another guy who's not starter quality. To me, that's a wasted scholarship spot. I'd rather save it for a recruit. You always are like, let's just try to win an extra game this year. Let's get to 8 wins instead of 7. I'm like, no.
You're already talking about Mario on the hot seat if he doesn't win. Of course, they got to try to win as many games as they can.
I notice you always interrupt me when you realize you're wrong. You need to get recruits to get
you. I reacted to what you said.
You need to get recruits in order to get to 10 wins in 2 years. I would rather give up and not give up in that sense. I'd rather give up the numbers in scholarships and have an open 3 or 4 or 5 spots this year to take an extra 3 or 5 or 3, 4 or 5 top recruits in this cycle. That'll be really, really good in 2 years. That'll be really, really good in 2 years because that's how you build a program, not by taking backups on the offensive line like Gary wants. Anyway, defensive line.
Grad transfers, it doesn't matter. All right, defensive line. The program is in a decent place at end. They've got a nice mix of veterans and young prospects. I feel pretty good about where the program is at end. I don't feel very good about where they are at tackle out there as the spring is ending. I know Leonard Taylor is going to be back. I know that Jared Harrison Hunt is going to be back. Neither one of those guys is a consistent, great performer. Leonard Taylor, enormous possibilities, but he's yet to pull it all together over the course of a season. Hopefully this year will be the year that happens. Harrison Hunt, same deal. More of like a role player type guy at that starting defensive tackle position. I think they will be looking in the portal for defensive tackles as well. Thoughts, Matt?
Here's what I do. As the genius I am, people are going to think I'm an idiot. But the portal's great. If you get a starting defensive tackle in the portal, yeah, that's fantastic. But let's say you can't get a really, really great defensive tackle in the portal. I think they're fine if they do this. Leonard Taylor starts and plays 80% of the snaps like a defensive tackle should. Messidor and Bain both play defensive tackle. Messidor can hold up in regular downs at defensive tackle. He can. And you could bring in Bain in third downs. You could keep Messidor outside sometimes. And if you have to, you just have to develop another defensive tackle behind them. But I mean, those are the three guys that I think would be your best defensive tackles right now from what I've seen. The two transfers they brought in, I don't want them on the field. I'm sorry. I've seen them. I don't think they belong on the field. Small and not strong enough. Then at defensive end, you got Jafari Harvey and Nigel Kelly. Play them 70, 80% of the time at defensive end. They're your best defensive ends in those situations, with Bain also working at defensive end. And, and you go on from there. There's other guys, maybe one of the other freshmen, Jaden certainly could fit in there. Or maybe, there's some other guys, they keep mentioning Ahmad Moten as a guy who's flashing at defensive tackle. That worries me because I've seen Ahmad Moten. He's not ready to play defensive tackle. Why they keep mentioning him like he's going to be this?
Well, because Matt Lee goes against him every day in practice and thinks he's getting better.
He's not going to say the guy's bad. Somebody asked, what about, whatever? Who do you go against?
Volunteered Ahmad, though.
Because somebody asked who who does well against him. He's only going against Ahmad Moten because that's the only healthy defensive tackle they use against him. Who's he supposed to mention? That's the only guy who plays against.
Another problem, which I think is one of the biggest problems the program has right now, is that they don't get a true picture of where they really are from practice. I don't believe they do. I don't think that the team is good enough in the two deep on both sides of the ball that they are getting, especially at the line of scrimmage, or a true read on how good they are or aren't. So
that's actually a great point. You know who else said that?
Shodell.
Shodell said that. That's who said that. Stop stealing my lines.
When did you say that?
I've been saying it for weeks. I say whenever they go against each other, either someone's doing well and the other person's not doing well. You can't tell anything from these practices. Either they're both bad or they're both good. Who knows which it is? I've said it over and over again. You don't even watch the show back or listen to me.
I definitely don't listen to you. I'm guilty.
Most people do not. Most people do not, and I agree with the people that do not listen to me. But you gave me the stupid platform on Good Morning CaneSport, so I just... Listen, if I wail away at the wall once or twice out of 100 times, I'm going to get it right. And then those 1 or 2 times I get it right, I keep repeating it over and over again, and then people think I'm a genius. It's a great formula.
All right, at the linebacker position, Francisco Maigoa has had a great spring. I think I feel very safe in saying he will be the starter in the middle. And it's looking like Wesley Bissainthe will be the probable starter on the outside. And that means that James Williams will probably stay in the free safety role and play opposite Cam Kitchens, which, we're not going to call that a problem. I mean, James is a good player. I think a lot of us are in agreement that he's best suited to be an outside linebacker, but that's not going to happen because that's not what he wants to be, and that's not the way the personnel on the football team is shaping up. They're okay there. And then at cornerback, I think that some of the young guys, like the Chris Graves of the world, have been making strides and getting better. I think Devontae Brown is going to be an exceptionally strong player. I think DeCorey Couch is playing the best football of his career so far. So DB, there's no elite performer there, Matt, but I would call it serviceable.
All right, you know who you are. You know who Pearl is? Do you know who Pearl is? The 2-year-old Chihuahua from Orlando? Pearl is the world's shortest dog. The length of a dollar bill. Okay? That's the world's shortest dog, according to the Guinness Book of World Records. You are Pearl because you are so short-sighted. You think the best linebacker on this team is Francisco Maigoa, right? I mean, yeah. So just to refresh, this guy comes in from Washington State, which is, not one of the nation's premier programs. They're okay. Didn't even was a 3-star. Didn't even start in 2021. Last year he finally gets to start. Finishes 4th on the team with 60 tackles. Has 5.5 tackles for a loss. He's an okay linebacker at Washington State. Comes to Miami and he's immediately the best linebacker according to a veteran reporter who has covered the Miami Hurricanes for 433 years. That's not good enough for me. For Matt Shodell. Gary's very happy with that.
Because you don't think it's good enough, or because you disagree with what I'm saying?
Because if you put together what you said, you literally a minute ago said it's.
But are you disagreeing with that? I know what I said. I said Francisco Maigoa.
I was going to say you said
back on the team. Are you disagreeing with that?
That's not what I was about to say. You always put words in my mouth. A few minutes ago, Gary said it's so hard to tell if somebody's actually good or not in spring practice because you don't know who they're going against. We don't know what's happening out there. Now, all of a sudden, though, Francisco Maigoa, the guy who started for 1 year at Washington State and had 60 tackles, 5.5 of them for losses, is this amazing player. Like, that's not me. I'll believe it when he does it in games. When he gets 100 tackles for Miami this year and 8.5 to 12 tackles for losses, I'll say Gary Ferman was right. I personally think he's not going to hit those. I personally think he's not going to hit those milestones. I think the safeties on this team will be the guys with the tackles for losses and the tackles. It's not ideal, but the way that that the defense is set up, the safeties make a lot of plays, and maybe it won't be the end of the world. Usually you don't want your safeties leading your team in tackles, but I have a feeling Cam Kinchins is going to be plus 80 tackles. I have a feeling James Williams is going to have 5+ sacks, and I have a feeling Francisco Mauigoa is going to have 5.5 tackles for loss, 60 tackles, and 3.5 sacks, just like he did a year ago, and we'll consider that a success. I'll take that because I don't think he's the best linebacker on this team. I think Wesley Basaint is. I think Keontre Smith is just as good as Francisco Mauigoa. And I think Corey Flagg might just give Mauigoa a run for his money when Flagg's actually back healthy again, because I happen to know that Lance Guidry loves Corey Flagg knowing exactly what to do all the time in his leadership and calling out defenses. Anyway, you were talking about the secondary. I didn't pay any attention. The secondary is going to be pretty good, but to be determined. The safeties we know are really good. Marquise Williams, I would give a shout out to. I thought he really looks good. Caleb Spencer will be a special teams monster, and he should be in the 2 deep right away, just from what I've seen and heard. And then the corners, Devontae Brown's the only guy that's standing out right now. I think Darryl Porter is going to be the other starter. I think they missed on Terry Roberts. I think Chris Graves will be very serviceable if they need him, and I think that DeCorey Couch will stay as the, whatever they call it, star bandit nickel, Ferminator, whatever. He'll be that.
All right, so that gives you guys just a little bit of a primer for what's been going on. Whether whether I'm right, Matt's right, it doesn't really matter. A lot of it's fluid right now, but at least we gave you a little bit of a summary. And those of you that are going to the spring game that may or may not be played tonight, we'll see. At least you'll have an idea what to look for as you're watching the game. But that's the way we see it to this point. All right, as part of our coverage, getting ready for the spring game, we have a lot of coverage on the recruits. The spring game is always about recruits. What recruits are going to show up and receive the final sales pitch from the coaches before the coaches start going out on their evaluation periods and the kids get ready to start having spring practice, and things kind of like a little bit of a monkey wrench gets thrown into the whole recruiting process. So, we take a look at what the visitor list looks like. We call it stacked. I mean, it's kind of stacked. You've got a 5-star defensive lineman who has spent the entire week in South Florida. That's Justin Scott from Chicago. He'll be out there. Some kids from California, Aiden Braylon, T.A. Cunningham, defensive lineman, will be out there. And an interesting twist with him is he is moving from California to Miami and is going to play at Miami Central this year. You can read the tea leaves on that. I think Miami's got a decent chance to land T.A. Cunningham. He's the number 79 national recruit, the number 10 defensive lineman, and the number 9 recruit in the state of California. So that's looking good. A couple other guys, Quan Patterson will be out there. He's the safety from Hollywood Chaminade. Chance Robinson, the wide receiver from Fort Lauderdale St. Thomas Aquinas. And by the way, Azubi Charles has a great Inside the Lines interview with him. If you haven't seen it yet, I recommend that you guys watch it. A couple other guys, Kevin Riley, a running back from Alabama, will be around. Dylan Stevenson, a defensive lineman from Miami Columbus, will be out there. Chancey Bowens, a running back from Palm Beach Gardens that Miami has picked up its recruitment of. He'll be out there. So, and a whole lot more. And we've got coverage of all that on the website. And Matt, recruiting's gotten off to a little bit of a slow start. Nothing to panic about. Mario Cristobal never tries to load up on commitments in March and April. He's a May, June, July guy when it comes to that kind of stuff. But it is a little slow. And your thoughts on whether, spring game aside tonight, there should be any level of concern about that?
Well, Mario Cristobal, while you're the shortest dog in the world, Mario Cristobal is Zeus. That's the largest dog in the world. It's 7 feet 4 inches tall. Ripped Gary Ferman's head off just like a linebacker in a football game. It would have to be Francisco Mauigoa because that's the only linebacker apparently good enough to rip off Gary Ferman's head. Just ask Gary. But Mario Cristobal he's how do they say it? A dog? I prefer to say koala bear, but he's a koala bear in recruiting. You know, he'll claw at you, he'll rip your head off. If you offer him a banana, he'd rather eat your head. That's Mario. He'll do whatever it takes to get top recruits. He understands the nature of recruiting, and he bonds really well with families. He bonds really well with student athletes, and he's real because he actually enjoys it. I'd say 99.9% of the coaches in the history of college football, the head coaches, do not enjoy recruiting. It's not why they wanted to be head coaches when they were little kids. When you're a little kid, you think, I want to be, you're watching the game of some championship game. I want to be the head coach. You're not thinking, I want to go into somebody's house and pander to them and beg the family to let them have their child come play for me. So it's sort of an inherited trait, and he just loves that whole rapport that you have to build and how it builds over time. And even recruits he doesn't get, he stays in touch with, I mean, I can't imagine Mario's phone. If you could look at the text messages on Mario's phone, just from one day of text messaging, it's probably my text messages for an entire year. The guy is relentless. He's got a work ethic like no other. And he's, I think, the best recruiter in the country, the best pure recruiter in the country, which is why I said earlier in the show, and I said it back when he was hired, it's just a shame NIL came about, not for the student athletes, it's great for them. But for a guy like Mario, if he had come to Miami 8 years ago when Gary Ferman had been pressing for Mario to get hired, it was the perfect time to get Mario because there was no NIL. It was just how hard do you recruit me? How big a bond do you build with me? How well can you coach me? And he checks the box in all of those. But now with NIL, basically, it's a money grab for a lot of families, and understandably and deservedly so. You don't begrudge that. If I had a child who was good enough to play any sport other than water polo, then I would, and that's just in my backyard, then I would certainly tell them, hey, so-and-so is offering you $500,000, your next best offer is $100,000. I know you love the coach at the $100,000, but dude, it's $500,000. So it's a tough situation because I think Mario has won a lot of recruiting battles that he doesn't win anymore. The money piece is a big one. Now, he had a great recruiting class last year, and that has to be the same case this year, and the money has to be there for him to be able to do it. These companies or company, they need to come through for Mario because Mario does his part. There's no doubt about it. If this doesn't work, if the next 2 years go south, it will not be from a lack of effort on Mario Cristobal's part. It'll be something else that happened, and my guess would be that something else would probably have to do with NIL. I mean, that's the shame of it. Like, they just need that NIL money to constantly be coming in, and so far so good, and hopefully it continues. But that's what worries me because that's really, to me, the only piece. I keep telling people, listen, within 2 to 3 years, we're going to be a playoff team at Miami. That's the only piece that if it falters, whatever the word is, then you're looking at a much longer timeline to get back to where this program should be.
Yeah, NIL is an issue on both sides. In football and in basketball right now. Football, they can't get enough. They got to keep raising money for NIL, and the collective needs to continue to grow because everything can't fall on John Ruiz's shoulders. Obviously, there's been a lot of debate and discussion about John Ruiz and his business and his stock and everything else. But regardless, you can't expect one guy to carry this whole thing forever. And I think there's a lot of movements afoot to try to enhance that situation, but it is not easy. There just are not a lot of people out there willing to give away money just for the hell of it. Okay. And that's what, that's what they're being asked to do. It's not like they're getting their name on a building. They're being asked to give away their money. Those people did not get rich by giving away their money. So we will continue to monitor and see what happens there. All right. Well, that's going to do it for Good Morning CaneSport this morning. We hope we've prepared you for the spring game. Hopefully it will be played tonight. But if the field is sloshy and unsafe, I personally hope that they don't delay in canceling it because I do not want to see kids subjecting themselves to injury on a bad turf. We'll see what happens there with this weather. It has not stopped raining in the Broward County area for 2 days. Probably, like I said, over 25 inches of rain in the last 48 hours. It's crazy. The airport's underwater. I can't remember ever seeing anything quite like this.
They said
But
it's
we thank you.
it's a once in a 1,000-year event, is what they said,
Yeah,
right?
I don't know. Like I said, I don't know who's counting back 1,000 years, but it is very wet in a lot of pockets of Broward County. All right, thank you so much for joining us this morning for Good Morning CaneSport. I hope we've given you a nice snapshot of the team going into the final day of spring practice. If you like this show, like our channel, hit your subscribe button, hit your like button. It helps us with the algorithms at YouTube. And if you are not yet a subscriber to CaneSport.com, we have a spring game special right now for the next couple days. You can get the next 4 months for $10. A great introductory special to come be part of our family, our community at CaneSport.com. Your subscriptions allow us to do what we do every day. We greatly appreciate every single one of you guys. So for Matt Shodell, I'm Gary Ferman. Thank you for joining us today, everybody. We'll see you next time.